We removed the two existential threats, the threat of annihilation by nuclear bombs and the threat of annihilation by 20,000 ballistic missiles. How did you prevent that threat? Oh yeah, you called Daddy America. Look at that. He's actually being truthful. He's actually being truthful. They were about to face the dangers of destruction. He's trying to say if they didn't take action, they would have faced this danger of destruction, which is a complete lie. But he is telling you the truth in the sense that he's putting a wrap up on this escapade against Iran because they were facing imminent destruction. And by all accounts, Israel was not built to last another week. Even Bezalel Smotrich, the hard-lined, right-wing, fanatic, fascist, extremist Zionist, admitted that Israel could not keep up their defenses for another week. So, obviously we see Satan putting a post-mortem on all this, and actually, coincidentally, even if it's under the wrong pretenses, he is telling you the truth. It's funny because they haven't done anything to the nuclear enrichment program as far as I can tell. I mean, even the New York Times chat is reporting that the strike set back Iran's nuclear program by only a few months. That's according to U.S. intelligence. This is the U.S. government telling you. And we can always find the real answer by looking at the documents provided by the U.S. government internally, not externally. But what they share amongst themselves, which is considered classified, is a lot more honest than anything uttered by Milikowski's mouth. Classified findings indicate that the attack sealed off the entrances to the two facilities, but it did not collapse their underground buildings. Furthermore, Iran knew that, the U.S. and Israel were targeting these sites, and they moved the centrifuges, as far as I can tell, to other locations. And also, consider the fact that it took the United States 10 years to find out about Fordo, that it existed. So at this point, who's to say our intelligence is even accurate? It might take us another 10 years to find out that there were other nuclear facilities within Iran that we didn't know about that actually were much more crucial. So a preliminary classified U.S. report says the American bombing of Iran's nuclear sites sealed off the entrances, but it did not collapse the buildings. Early findings conclude that the strikes over the weekend set back Iran's nuclear program by only a few months, the official said. Remember when we laughed watching Fox News? They showed this before-after of Fordo, and it looked exactly the same, and they're like, it was total destruction. We totally destroyed Fordo. It's just like Trump's propaganda team, but that's Fox News for you. We were laughing at that. We knew that nothing had happened even before this report, even now before the New York Times is reporting about this. It's not exactly a revelation. Okay, if you have any critical thinking, to understand that the strike against Iran and its nuclear facilities did absolutely nothing. The early findings conclude that the strikes over the weekend set back only by a few months. Before the attack, U.S. intelligence agencies had said that if Iran tried to rush to making a bomb, it would take about 3 months. Well, they've been saying 3 months for 40 years, and Iran has never had a nuclear weapon. And the more that you dig and look for facts, you find out that Iran has been in compliance with every treaty and every international agreement on the proliferation of nuclear, and including the level of enrichment. Nuclear energy doesn't necessarily, sorry, I can't speak. It doesn't mean that they're going to use it for the nuclear energy is for civilian use as well. Will they close the Strait of Hormuz? I don't think so. At this point, I don't think so. I think it would also be a detriment to Iran to do that as well. Good point was made to me, and I'll share it with you right now. I just learned that the manufactured consent reason is that they're going to develop nuclear bombs, and that's why we need to control and diminish and destroy their nuclear enrichment program. But really what it is regime change, because if you control the nuclear program, the ability for a country to create nuclear energy for civilian use, that means that you are depriving energy from the population, and the population not having its needs met, will be forced to rise up and perhaps retaliate against its government, and there'll be all these factions. So it's a way of dividing that internal contradiction. It's a way to exacerbate those tensions, those frictions in Iranian society, just like there's internal frictions in American society. Which sort of brings me to my next point, which is to say that in times of invasion, those what are considered primary contradictions in a country. So let's take a country like, let's say France. France is a Western capitalist country. There's obviously the internal division of capitalism within that country, okay? Which means that there's a class war happening inside of France between the workers and the owners, just like there is inside every other country, virtually, considering that capitalism is the global economy. But yet those differences, those contradictions subside in times of external invasion. So when a foreign country decides to invade, like if the United States decides to invade France, or whoever decides to invade France, whatever foreign entity it is, that distinction, that antagonism between two classes will be superseded, supplanted by the primary contradiction, which has now become imperialism versus indigenous economic nationalism. Why am I mentioning that? Because that's what's happening right now. It doesn't matter what Iranians think of the Ayatollah Khomeini. They are being sabotaged. They're being invaded by a foreign enemy. And so all unite under the banner of the Iranian flag, and whatever government is there to protect them from imperial onslaught. So just to think about the condescension when you listen to Israelis making these propaganda videos saying, oh, we care about the Iranian people, we're trying to set them free. Oh, we love our ancient historical buddies in Iran. We want you to have what we have. Like anybody looks at Israeli society and says, oh yeah, I want that. So that's why you can't really talk about domestic Iranian politics. I mean, unless you're in Iran and you're an Iranian, by all the means, you can have your critique of your government because you have a small but not insignificant amount of influence in changing your government's policy as a citizen of that country. But we in the West especially have no room to talk, to pearl clutch, or to conduct a moral purity test on the Iranian domestic politics when we are guilty of subverting and sabotaging them at every turn, economically, via sanctions, the coups that we've instigated against them. The leaking of this alleged assessment is a clear attempt to demean President Trump and discredit the brave fighter pilots who conducted a perfectly Yeah, how dare you insult our troops? I don't know, your fact-based analysis report kind of sounds like you don't support our troops. Everyone knows what happens. Look, everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets. Total obliteration. Funny that you have to resort to saying this because you can't show this. You're just like, well, everyone knows that what happens. Do we? Perfectly on their targets? The targets were burrowed inside of a mountain, like a mile down into the earth. Maybe not a mile, but maybe it's a quarter mile. And either way, there's no way for these bunker busters to reach their targets. They don't have the capabilities. But you're saying, actually, she's not even referring to the bunker busters. She's referring to the Tomahawk missiles. And there's that erroneous 14, as one of you pointed out earlier. There's that figure. So everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets. Everyone knows what happens when you can't show that you completed and accomplished total obliteration by dropping 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets. And that is that you will resort to just saying that everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets. When you can't show total obliteration, you just have to talk about it. The strikes badly damaged the electrical system at Fordo, which is housed deep inside a mountain to shield it from attacks, officials said. It is not clear how long it will take Iran to gain access to the underground buildings and then repair the electrical systems and reinstall equipment that was moved. Look at that, total obliteration. Look, there's no building left standing on the surface. Literally. Wow. I mean, do you see a building anywhere, really? Look at all the buildings that were destroyed. All right, I'll stop.